It started the night she said the word pregnant. Not with joy, not with laughter, just that quiet syllable hanging between us like smoke. I remember thinking how strange it was that something so small could make a room feel so cold. She smiled, waiting for me to react, and all I could do was count backward in my head, to the week I was in Seattle, the 10 nights I didn't come home. That's when I knew. This story wasn't about love anymore. It was about the moment it ended pretending to be one. It started with the rain. That soft, steady kind that paints the windows in trembling silver veins. The kitchen smelled like roasted garlic and something sweet, maybe the apple pie Emily was baking. I remember the sound of the clock, the slow ticking that seemed louder than usual. I was stirring my coffee, half listening to the radio murmuring about storms across the lake, when she said my name. Mike. Something in her tone made me look up. She was standing by the counter, both hands resting on her stomach, like she was afraid it might vanish if she didn't hold it there. Her eyes were wide, glowing in that way they used to when she had good news to share. "There's something I need to tell you," she whispered. Then she smiled almost shyly. "I'm pregnant." The word hung in the air like a stone dropped in water, soft at first, then sinking deeper and deeper until it disappeared. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just watched her, the woman I thought I knew, standing in our kitchen with her hands folded over a secret that didn't make sense. Pregnant. My first reaction wasn't joy. It was math. My brain, ever the accountant, began calculating without my permission. 2 months ago, Seattle. 10 days. No way to come home. I remembered the hotel receipts, the timestamps on my emails, the sleepless nights. It wasn't possible. She waited for my reaction, the silence stretching until it almost hurt. Finally, I forced a smile. "That's amazing," I managed. My voice sounded like it came from someone else. Her relief was instant. She crossed the kitchen, wrapped her arms around me, and buried her face in my chest. I felt her heartbeat, quick and warm against my ribs. I wanted to believe it, to let the story she'd just told become real. But there was a hollowness spreading through me, a quiet understanding that this moment, this kitchen, this woman, this announcement, had nothing to do with me anymore. She pulled back, eyes wet, laughing softly. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared. But this is going to change everything, Mike. A new chapter for us. A new chapter." She said it like a promise. I nodded, kissed her forehead, and said all the right words. How happy I was, how proud. How unexpected but wonderful this news was. I even helped her clean up after dinner, rinsing plates that still smelled of rosemary and butter. She talked the entire time about colors for the nursery, names she'd always liked, how she'd have to stop drinking coffee. I stood beside her, nodding at the right moments, pretending I wasn't somewhere else entirely. When she went to bed, I poured myself a drink. The whiskey burned the way truth should. I stepped onto the balcony, the rain cooling my skin. Chicago's skyline glimmered through the mist, distant and indifferent. The city never cared who lied or who got betrayed. It just kept moving, breathing, shining. Inside, the lights were dim. I could hear her humming softly in the bedroom, probably folding the blanket she liked to keep at her feet. It was the kind of small, ordinary sound that once would have made me smile. Now it just echoed inside me like wind through an empty hall. I stared into the glass, watching the amber liquid catch the faint reflection of my face. A man who should have been happy. A man who'd just been told he was going to be a father. But there was nothing. No rush of joy, no fear, no love. Just silence. It was a cold kind of silence, not absence, but something purer. Absolute. I thought about asking her again, just once, if she was sure. But I didn't. There was no point in forcing a lie to confess itself before it was ready. Lies have their own timing. They like to ripen. Instead, I finished my drink and whispered to no one, "Congratulations, Mike. You finally learned how quiet the truth can be." The rain kept falling. Inside, the woman who said she was carrying my child was already asleep, dreaming perhaps of baby names or tiny socks. And I stood there, listening to the storm, waiting for the sound in my heart. It never came. The next morning, I arrived at the office before sunrise. The rain from last night had frozen into a thin film of ice over the windows, turning the skyline into a blur of gray and gold. My assistant, Jenna, wasn't in yet. The silence felt right, sterile, clean, perfect for what I needed to do. I powered on the computer and watched the screen come alive, each folder and shortcut flickering to life like memories I didn't want. For a while, I just sat there, staring at the desktop, letting my coffee go cold. Then I opened my calendar. Seattle, 10 days. Check. Flight receipts, hotel confirmations, meal transactions, all with timestamps. I opened each document carefully, methodically, the way I used to balance investment portfolios for clients. The numbers didn't lie. They never did. 2 months ago, I was 2,000 miles away when the supposed conception happened. I stared at the timeline, tracing it with my finger across the monitor. Even if I'd wanted to believe her, there was no margin for error. None. The truth was a clean line, sharp, surgical. The kind that cuts before you even feel it. I opened a new folder on the desktop. I named it cold_procedure. Inside it, I created the first file, timeline.txt. Then I started typing. Day 1. Discovery. Maintain calm. Observe. Collect. The cursor blinked at me like a heartbeat. I took a deep breath and added another line. Emotion is the enemy of accuracy. It wasn't something I believed before, but it felt right now. Every word I typed steadied me. The fury, the disbelief, all of it folded into a shape I could control. I didn't shout. I didn't break things. I didn't confront her. I simply planned. The office lights hummed softly. Outside, the first employees were arriving. Distant footsteps, voices echoing down the hall. I closed the blinds and kept working. I made a list of her routines. Yoga on Thursdays, lunch with Sophie on Fridays, grocery runs on Sundays. I cross-referenced them with my trip dates. Too many coincidences, too much alignment. I highlighted each in red. When the phone rang, I let it buzz until it stopped. I wasn't ready to speak to anyone yet. Words had become dangerous. They exposed cracks. Around noon, I looked at her last text, the one she'd sent before my flight to Seattle. Miss you already. Don't work too hard. Sweet. Ordinary. Perfectly forgettable. That was the thing about lies. They never announce themselves with thunder. They arrive in lowercase letters, hidden between sentences that sound like love. By the time I closed the laptop, it was dark again. The city outside had turned into a sea of blurred lights. I could see my reflection in the glass, still, expressionless, efficient. A man who once believed in honesty, now believing only in proof. I poured a drink from the office decanter and let it settle in my hand. I thought about calling her, asking what she was doing. But what would be the point? To hear her voice tremble slightly before she lied again? No. The truth deserved silence. That's when I decided I wouldn't accuse. I wouldn't even hint that I knew. I'd observe. Watch her move, talk, smile. I'd see who she really was when she thought no one was looking. I created another file in the folder, rules.txt. No confrontation until proof is absolute. Record don't react. Never let her suspect. Revenge is premature satisfaction. Evidence is permanent. When I finished typing, I leaned back in my chair. For the first time in days, my breathing was steady. That night, back home, she greeted me with a kiss. She was wearing a loose sweater, her hair damp from a shower, her smile easy and soft. "You're home early," she said, and I almost laughed at the irony. "Slow day," I answered. "Thought I'd cook." Her eyes lit up, and she wrapped her arms around my neck. Her body was warm against mine, her breath faintly sweet from wine. There was a time when that closeness would have meant something. Now it was just data, proximity, tone, temperature. As I cooked, she leaned against the counter, talking about her day. I listened carefully, noting every pause, every hesitation. Her story was smooth, practiced. She'd learned how to lie the way some people learn to dance, gracefully, on beat. At one point, she walked up behind me, brushed her fingers along my neck, and whispered, "You're so quiet lately." "Work," I said. "That's all." She smiled, though her eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen before, guilt maybe, or fear, or both. Then she kissed me, soft and deliberate, and for a second I almost felt it again, that spark, that pull. My hand slipped around her waist out of habit. Her skin was warm, smooth. My body remembered even when my heart didn't. But when she pulled away and turned back to pour wine, I saw the faintest tremor in her hands. That was all I needed to see. Later that night, when she fell asleep beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her breathing was soft, steady, innocent. I turned my head and watched her face, the woman I'd built my life around, the one who now lived inside a lie. I reached for my phone, opened the cold_procedure folder, and added one final line to the file before the screen dimmed. Day 1 complete. Target unaware. Then I turned off the phone, set it face down on the nightstand, and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The following Monday, I found myself standing in front of a small office tucked between a pawn shop and a dry cleaner on West Madison. A crooked sign above the door read Jensen & Company. Private investigations. It didn't look like much, a place where secrets went to die quietly, without ceremony. Exactly what I needed. The inside smelled faintly of coffee and rain-soaked paper. The blinds were half drawn, filtering the afternoon light into pale stripes that cut across a filing cabinet overflowing with folders. Behind a cluttered desk sat a woman in her 40s, dark hair pulled back, eyes like glass, sharp, reflective, unreadable. "You must be Mr. Reed," she said. Her voice was calm, deliberate. "I'm Laura Jensen." I shook her hand. Her grip was firm. She gestured for me to sit. "So," she began, leaning back slightly, "you said on the phone that you think your wife might be involved with someone?" "I don't think," I said quietly. "I know. I just need to confirm who." Her pen tapped lightly against a notepad. "You're sure you want to do this? Once we start, there's no unknowing what we find." I hesitated, then nodded. "I'm sure." She studied me for a moment. "Most people," she said later, came in shaking, voices breaking, eyes red. But I was calm. Too calm. I think that unsettled her more than anger would have. "I'll need her schedule," she said. "Photos. Details. Any patterns you've noticed?" I handed her a thin folder I'd prepared. Copies of receipts, GPS logs, screenshots of her calendar entries. Every page was a piece of the puzzle I'd already started to build. "You've done your homework," she murmured, flipping through it. "You want photographs? Video? Everything," I said. "I need proof that no one can question." "Discretion is standard," she replied. "You'll have results within a week." I nodded, signed the paperwork, and handed her a check. My signature looked foreign, as if someone else had written it. Before I left, she stopped me. "Mr. Reed," she said, "when you get the truth, don't expect it to feel clean. People think knowing is closure, but it's just another kind of burden." "I'm ready for that," I told her. But I wasn't. That evening, Emily made pasta for dinner. The kitchen smelled like basil and garlic again, the same domestic comfort that once meant peace. She wore a loose gray shirt, her hair in a messy bun. She looked beautiful, familiar, deceptively innocent. "How was work?" she asked, sitting across from me. "Busy," I said. "How about you?" She smiled. "Tiring. I went to lunch with Sophie. You know her new boyfriend? Total disaster. She spent half the time crying into her salad." I nodded, pretending to listen. The words lunch with Sophie flickered in my head like a red warning light. I logged it mentally. Thursday, 1 p.m., confirm later. She reached across the table and touched my hand. "You've been distant lately," she said softly. "Is everything okay?" I looked into her eyes, green, steady, searching. She was so good at pretending. Maybe she didn't even know she was doing it anymore. Maybe lies had become muscle memory. "I'm fine," I said. "Just work stress." She squeezed my hand, smiled faintly, and went back to her food. I forced myself to eat, to smile, to match her rhythm. Every movement had to be calculated, every word measured. Later, after dinner, we watched a movie. She leaned against me on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder. I could smell her shampoo, lavender, and something warm beneath it, something that once drove me crazy. When she laughed at the screen, her body pressed closer, and for a moment I felt the old gravity between us, that physical pull that didn't care about morality or truth. My hand brushed her thigh, without thinking. She turned her head slightly, eyes half-lidded. "Still distracted?" she whispered, a hint of teasing in her voice. "Maybe," I said. Her lips found mine, soft, searching. The kiss deepened, slow and deliberate. My body reacted instinctively, but my mind didn't join. Even as her breath quickened and her hand slid along my chest, part of me stood back, observing, detached, clinical. When she pulled away to whisper something against my ear, I caught it. The faintest slip, the wrong name forming before she caught herself. She stopped, blinked, smiled. "Right, sorry, my head's all over the place tonight." I didn't move, didn't speak, just kissed her again, slow enough to make her believe I hadn't noticed. Inside, my pulse went silent. Afterward, she fell asleep almost immediately. I watched her again, the same profile I'd memorized 100 times before, and wondered who she dreamed of now. I slipped quietly out of bed, went to my desk, and opened the cold _ procedure folder. A new entry went into timeline.txt. Day 5. Subject slipped. Possible name, Ryan. Maintain observation. Then another file. Suspects.txt. 1. Ryan. Unknown relationship to subject. To confirm. I sat there for a long time, listening to the rhythm of her breathing in the next room. Outside, the city's hum felt distant, indifferent. A machine that didn't care, whose life it crushed in its gears. In the quiet, I understood something Jensen had said earlier. Knowing doesn't clean the wound. It just removes the bandage. Still, I wanted more. I wanted the infection exposed. Tomorrow, the first report would come in. Tomorrow, the guessing would end. A week later, I got the call. Laura Jensen's voice was calm, almost casual. "Mr. Reed, I have what you asked for. You might want to come in." I was already in my car, before she hung up. The city outside was wrapped in that thin winter sunlight, the kind that looks warm until you step into it. By the time I reached her office, my fingers were cold around the steering wheel, my pulse slow and steady like a metronome. She greeted me with the same professional detachment as before, only this time there was something different in her eyes. Not pity, exactly, but a quiet respect for what she was about to hand over. "I'll let the images speak for themselves," she said, sliding a thick envelope across the desk. I opened it. Inside were photographs, printed, glossy, each one a blow to the ribs. Emily, standing beside a car I didn't recognize. Emily, laughing, her hand resting lightly on a man's arm. Emily, walking into the Hampton Suites hotel with him, Ryan. The timestamps were precise. Multiple days. Multiple times. I flipped through them one by one. The camera had caught details I wished it hadn't. Her hair tied the way she wore it when she wanted to be kissed, the familiar coat I'd bought her for Christmas, the way she tilted her head when she smiled, that same expression I used to think was only mine. Jensen watched me, saying nothing. After a moment, she reached into her drawer and placed a flash drive on the desk. "There's more," she said quietly. "Video, text screenshots, GPS data. You'll want to see it alone." I nodded. Then, just as I was about to leave, she added, "You didn't hear this from me, but it's been going on for months. I think she's careful, but not enough. The man's name is Ryan Fletcher, corporate consultant. Works in the same building as your wife's company. Same parking structure. Same gym." The details didn't surprise me. They only confirmed what my instincts had whispered for weeks. Back home, I poured a glass of whiskey before opening the laptop. The flash drive fit into the port with a soft click, and the folder bloomed onto the screen. IMG_1452, IMG_1453, VID_327, and so on. The video started with static, then focus. A hotel parking lot, late evening. Emily's car pulled in. A few minutes later, Ryan arrived. They met halfway, hugging quickly, glancing around before disappearing through the hotel doors. I watched the timestamp roll. An hour later, they emerged, laughing. His hand was on her waist. She leaned into him. Her smile looked genuine. I paused the frame. Her eyes were bright, almost glowing. I tried to remember the last time she'd looked at me like that. I couldn't. The next video was worse. The two of them at a park, casual, comfortable, their heads close together as if the world didn't exist beyond their bench. Ryan kissed her temple. She smiled. That same tilt of the head again. I watched them eat ice cream. I watched them hold hands. I watched the pieces of my life rearrange themselves into a story I hadn't written. There was no sound in the video, but my mind filled in the silence. Her laugh, the soft words she used when she wanted to make me forget we were arguing, the tone that always melted my anger. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. The snow outside had started falling, slow, delicate, indifferent. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stared at the reflection of the blank screen, my face floating faintly in the black glass like a ghost that hadn't realized he was dead yet. For a long time, I sat like that, still, expressionless, efficient. The whiskey glass sweated against my palm. The air smelled faintly of her perfume, lingering from the night before. At some point, I opened timeline.txt again and typed. Day 12. Confirmation received. Subject exposed with Ryan Fletcher. Proof, photo, and video. Emotional response, none. Then I added one more line, slower this time. Continue observation. Maintain mask. That last sentence felt heavier than the rest. Later that night, Emily came home, snow in her hair, cheeks flushed. She kissed me on the cheek, the way you'd kiss a friend, and smiled. You wouldn't believe the traffic, she said. I nodded, forcing the smile she expected. Hungry, she asked. I could make soup. Sure, I said. She turned toward the kitchen, humming softly. I watched her from the doorway, the same woman from the video, now wrapped in the familiar choreography of our home. The dissonance was almost beautiful in its cruelty. At dinner, she talked about work. I listened. She laughed. I joined her. Every gesture, every glance, I recorded in my mind. It was strange how effortless the performance became. I even caught myself admiring the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the same way she had in the park. When she went to bed, I stayed in the living room, lights off. The only sound was the whisper of the snow against the windows. I thought of the flash drive still plugged into the laptop, of the truth it carried, frozen in pixels and light. It wasn't anger I felt. It was something colder, the quiet realization that she wasn't mine anymore, and maybe never had been. I poured another drink, lifted the glass toward the dark window, and whispered to my reflection, Day 12 complete. Then I drank, and the world went still. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. Emily was still asleep beside me, her breathing steady, the faint scent of her shampoo rising from the pillow. For a moment, I just watched her, the way her lips parted slightly when she dreamed, the soft curve of her shoulder under the blanket. She looked peaceful, untouched, innocent. If I hadn't seen the videos, I might have believed she was. I slipped quietly out of bed, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, reviewing the files again on my laptop. I wasn't looking for new information. I just wanted the images to lose their power. I thought that if I watched them enough, the shock would dull into something manageable. It didn't. Each time her laugh appeared on screen, it still tore through me like a soft knife. By the time she woke up, I was calm again, calm enough to play my part. Morning, she said, walking into the kitchen, still half asleep. Her hair was messy, her smile lazy. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, I said, smiling back. Thought I'd make breakfast. Her eyes softened. You're sweet. The word stung more than it should have. Sweet. Like something harmless. That day marked the beginning of what I called the mask. Every move I made was deliberate, precise, rehearsed. I became the man she believed I was, attentive, loving, predictable. I cooked dinner, brought home flowers, asked about her day. I laughed at her jokes. I even touched her the same way I used to, tracing the familiar lines of her skin like a map I already knew would lead nowhere. It was almost artistic, this performance of normalcy. At first, she was tense, maybe expecting a confrontation. But as days passed, she relaxed. The way she looked at me changed, guilt melting into relief. She thought the storm had passed. She thought she'd won. Sometimes, while she cooked or read on the couch, I'd watch her silently, wondering how two versions of the same person could exist at once. The woman who smiled at me across the table, and the one who met Ryan in that hotel room. She didn't notice the difference in me, because I'd learned to hide it well. Every evening, after she went to bed, I updated timeline.txt, new entries, observations, patterns. It wasn't rage driving me anymore. It was curiosity. How long could a lie survive when treated with kindness instead of confrontation? One night, she came home later than usual. Her hair was slightly damp, her eyes bright. "Sorry," she said, kissing my cheek. "Had to finish a client call." I smiled. "No problem. Everything okay?" "Yeah, just exhausting. You know how it is." I did. I knew exactly how it was. She poured herself a glass of wine, scrolling through her phone. I saw the faint curve of her lips as she read something, a private smile. Then she typed quickly, the soft clicking of her nails echoing in the quiet kitchen. "Who are you texting?" I asked casually. She looked up, startled for a fraction of a second before laughing. "Sophie. She's having another fight with that guy." Of course she was. Sophie, the invisible scapegoat. "That poor woman," I said. "You two talk a lot, huh?" "Yeah, she needs someone," Emily said, sipping her wine. "And I don't mind. She listens when I need to vent too." I smiled and leaned closer, brushing my fingers along her wrist. "I'm glad you have her." Her pulse fluttered beneath my touch. For a second, I wondered if she could tell that I was memorizing it, the rhythm of her heartbeat when she lied. Later that night, when she fell asleep beside me, I looked at her phone on the nightstand. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The truth was already complete. The phone was just a mirror reflecting the world she built outside me. Instead, I opened timeline.txt and wrote, Day 18. Subject, relaxed. Believes tension resolved. Continues parallel relationship. Maintain performance. The next morning, I brought her flowers, lilies, her favorite. Her eyes lit up when I handed them to her. "What's this for?" she asked. "For us," I said simply. "For trying." She kissed me, long and tender, the kind of kiss meant to erase memory. It didn't work. I felt every second of it, the taste of her, the warmth, the body I still desired even while despising its betrayal. It was cruel, how attraction could survive where trust had died. That evening, I made dinner, rosemary chicken, roasted potatoes, wine. She laughed more than usual, talking about names for the baby, her hands unconsciously touching her stomach between sentences. I nodded, asked questions, even reached out to feel the faint curve beneath her shirt. She smiled, tears in her eyes. "Can you believe it?" she whispered. "We're really doing this." I smiled back. "Yeah," I said softly. "It's incredible." After she went to bed, I stood in the dark kitchen, staring at the empty plates. The scent of rosemary lingered in the air, mixing with the faint perfume she'd left on my shirt. I thought about the baby, about the life she'd promised me, a life built on someone else's mistake. Or maybe not a mistake at all. Maybe she'd chosen him. The thought didn't hurt anymore. It just existed. Before turning off the lights, I opened the cold_procedure folder one last time and typed, Day 19. The mask holds. Subject, unsuspecting. Politeness, the perfect weapon. Then I closed the laptop, poured myself another drink, and smiled at my reflection in the window, a stranger with my face. Revenge doesn't arrive like thunder. It whispers. It builds itself quietly in the corners of your mind, one thought at a time, until it starts to feel like strategy. It began with an invitation. A mutual friend, Olivia, was turning 30 and had planned a dinner at the Golden Elm, one of those places where the lights are soft enough to make everyone look a little happier than they are. Emily was thrilled. "We have to go," she said, grinning as she adjusted her earrings in the mirror. "It'll be good to see everyone." I watched her reflection, her face glowing with that familiar confidence. She looked beautiful, too beautiful, like someone rehearsing for a role. I smiled. Of course, I said. Wouldn't miss it. What she didn't know was that I'd already chosen this night as the one. The night everything would come to light. The plan had been forming for days, subtle, clean, almost surgical. No shouting, no chaos. Just precision. I'd taken the flash drive Jensen gave me, copied its contents, and edited a short slideshow, carefully, methodically. Photographs of us, vacations, anniversaries mixed seamlessly with a few of her and Ryan. The same smiles. The same gestures. Two versions of love colliding in sequence. I renamed the file, happy_memories.pptx. The original birthday slideshow, Olivia's, was already on the restaurant's projector. I knew because I'd offered to help set it up. A simple swap at the right moment would be enough. That evening, rain glazed the streets again, turning Chicago's neon signs into puddles of color. Emily sat beside me in the car, humming to the radio. Her hand brushed mine, warm and familiar. You seem quiet tonight, she said softly. I smiled, just thinking about how good it'll be to see everyone. Inside, the restaurant was crowded, laughter spilling across polished wood tables. Olivia hugged us both, radiant in her green dress. Emily chatted easily with friends, her charm flawless as ever. Watching her was like watching a magician, every gesture perfectly timed, every smile misdirection. When the waiter poured champagne, I excused myself to help with the slideshow. The staff barely noticed me as I slipped the flash drive into the projector's port. My hands were steady, almost unervingly so. The screen flickered to life. The first images appeared. Olivia's childhood photos, college snapshots, smiling faces. Laughter filled the room. I waited, one slide, 2, 3, before my version took over. It happened so smoothly that for a second, even I couldn't tell when it began. The laughter died down, replaced by murmurs. Emily's face appeared on the screen, not alone, but with him. Ryan, his hand at her waist, her lips near his cheek. Another photo, them entering the hotel. Another, their hands intertwined. The timestamps in the corner were clear, merciless. The silence that followed was absolute. Forks froze midair. Olivia's smile vanished. Emily stared at the screen, her color draining. Her lips parted soundlessly, a soft gasp that barely escaped her throat. Her eyes flicked toward me, panic, disbelief, pleading. I stood slowly, straightening my jacket. Sorry, I said evenly, my voice carrying through the stunned quiet. Wrong file. My mistake. Then I turned and walked out. No shouting. No scenes. Just the clean slice of silence following me through the doorway. Outside, the night air was cold against my skin, leaving everything shining under the streetlights. I lit a cigarette, something I hadn't done in years, and exhaled slowly, watching the smoke twist and disappear. Through the restaurant window, I saw movement, people standing, whispering, turning toward her. Emily's shoulders trembled as she covered her face with her hands. Ryan wasn't there. He'd skipped the dinner. Convenient. For the first time since the night she said she was pregnant, I felt something break through the numbness. Not joy. Not even satisfaction. Just clarity. I walked to the car, sat behind the wheel, and stared at the rain-speckled windshield. My reflection looked almost serene, calm, detached, like someone watching the end of a movie they'd already spoiled for themselves. I thought about calling her, but what was left to say? Words would only cheapen the precision of what had already been done. When I got home, I opened timeline.txt and added a new entry. Day 26. Exposure successful. Subject publicly revealed. Emotional response minimal. Objective achieved. I stared at the blinking cursor for a while, then added another line. Maintain silence. Let consequences unfold. I closed the file, leaned back, and listened to the soft hum of the refrigerator. The house felt different now, lighter, cleaner, though not warmer. An hour later, my phone buzzed. One message, how could you? Please. We need to talk. I read it twice, then deleted it without replying. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. No dreams, no noise. Just dark, absolute quiet. And when morning came, the world looked the same, except now, The truth belonged to everyone. I was pouring myself another drink when the door burst open. Emily stood in the doorway, rain still clinging to her coat, mascara smeared in black arcs beneath her eyes. She looked smaller somehow, fragile, trembling, like a marionette whose strings had been cut. "How could you do that?" she gasped, slamming the door behind her. "In front of everyone?" "My friends, my colleagues." I set the glass down carefully on the counter. "You mean our friends," I said quietly. "Funny thing about friends, they tend to stop being yours when they find out who you really are." Her chest rose and fell fast. "You humiliated me, Mike. Do you have any idea?" "Sit down," I interrupted. My tone wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Something in it made her stop mid-sentence. She stared at me for a long moment, then took a hesitant step closer. Her eyes were bloodshot, her lips trembling. "You didn't have to. You could have just talked to me. We could have fixed this." I laughed softly, without humor. "You don't fix betrayal, Emily. You document it." Her eyes widened slightly, as if the word itself scared her. "Document." I gestured toward the table, where a neat stack of papers waited beside a small audio recorder. "Sit," I repeated. She hesitated, then sank into the chair, her soaked coat clinging to her like a confession. I pressed a button on the recorder. Her own voice filled the silence, soft, intimate, unmistakable. "Mike doesn't suspect a thing." The color drained from her face. "Where did you?" "Doesn't matter," I said. "It's you. With Ryan. Recorded 3 weeks ago." She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I slid the papers toward her, printed photographs, transcripts, and finally the top document, petition for divorce. Beneath it, a second envelope labeled DNA test request. She stared at the words, her breath catching. "No," she whispered. "Mike, please." I cut her off. "We'll handle this like adults. No shouting. Just signatures." Tears welled in her eyes. "You can't mean this." "We can talk. I'll explain." "Explain what?" I asked evenly. "Which night it happened? Which hotel? Which lie came first?" Her hand went to her stomach. Instinct, maybe guilt. "I made a mistake," she said finally, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for any of this." I stood. "Stop." She flinched. "Don't say you didn't mean it," I continued quietly. "You chose it. You planned it. You kept it alive every time you looked me in the eye and smiled." Her shoulders shook. "You don't understand, Ryan. He." "Spare me," I said. "You weren't coerced. You weren't lost. You were bored. And boredom makes people creative." She covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. The sound should have moved me, but it didn't. I felt nothing, just a low, cold stillness spreading through my chest. After a while, she lifted her head. "I still love you," she whispered. "Even after everything. You have to believe that." I studied her face, the raw desperation in her eyes, the streaks of mascara, the trembling lips. Once, those same lips had promised me forever. Now they could barely hold a lie together. "I don't," I said simply. She reached across the table, but I stepped back. "Sign them," I said, nodding toward the papers. "Then you can pack your things and go." Her voice broke. "Please, don't do this tonight. Not after." "Now," I said. She stared at me, searching for a trace of softness, something to bargain with. When she found none, she picked up the pen. Her hand trembled as she signed each page. When she was done, she pushed them toward me and whispered, "Is that it?" I looked at her for a long moment. "That's it." She stood slowly, eyes glistening. "You think this makes you strong?" she asked, her voice shaking. "It doesn't. You'll wake up tomorrow and realize you've destroyed the only person who ever." I cut her off again, my tone calm. "No, Emily. You destroyed yourself." I just turned on the lights. She stared at me one last time, then grabbed her coat and fled down the hall. The front door slammed, leaving the house in a ringing silence. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the empty chair across from me. The faint scent of her perfume still lingered, jasmine and something bitter underneath. I turned off the recorder, gathered the papers, and placed them neatly into a folder labeled cold_procedure. Phase 2. Before heading to bed, I made one final entry. Day 27. Subject confronted. proof delivered. Emotional reaction, tears, denial, regression. Termination initiated. In the darkness of the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the rain starting again outside. Somewhere, she was crying too. Maybe on the street, maybe in her car, maybe in someone else's arms. But I didn't chase her. I simply turned off the lamp, lay down, and stared into the dark ceiling, the silence pressing against me like a second skin. For the first time, I realized the truth Jensen had hinted at: knowing doesn't heal you. It just leaves you empty, clean, and cold. And that night, cold was enough. The law office smelled faintly of cedar and disinfectant, a sterile mix that made even pain feel procedural. I sat across the table, my hands folded neatly, the divorce papers stacked beside me like an autopsy report. Emily sat to my left, silent, her face pale beneath a layer of makeup that couldn't hide the exhaustion. Across from us sat Ryan. He looked worse than she did, eyes hollow, jaw clenched, fingers twitching against the edge of the chair. I wondered if he'd slept at all since the dinner. Probably not. Guilt rarely sleeps well. Mark Holloway, my lawyer, was a large man with silver hair and the kind of voice that filled rooms without effort. "Thank you all for being here," he began, adjusting his glasses. "Let's keep this civil. We're here to finalize the agreements and avoid further complications." I nodded once. Emily didn't respond. Ryan muttered something under his breath that sounded like yeah, but didn't quite make it out. Mark continued, flipping through the documents. Property division is already outlined. The marital home goes to Mr. Reed. The joint account will be liquidated and split per the attached schedule. Mrs. Reed has waived spousal support. There's also a pending request for DNA confirmation regarding the pregnancy. Emily flinched at that. Her hand went instinctively to her stomach, then fell away when she realized I'd seen it. Ryan's gaze darted toward her, then to me. "This isn't fair," he said suddenly, his voice tight. "You're treating her like she's some kind of criminal." I turned to him slowly, meeting his eyes. She lied. "You helped. The difference between that and a crime is paperwork." Mark didn't look up from the file. "Mr. Fletcher, you're not a party to the divorce. Your presence here is voluntary. Please remember that." Ryan's jaw worked. "I'm not going anywhere." Emily's voice was small when she spoke. "Mike, please. Can't we just talk? Without lawyers, without." "We already talked," I said evenly. "For years. You just forgot to listen." She blinked hard, a tear slipping free before she caught it. The silence stretched, the sound of papers turning filling the space between us. Mark cleared his throat. "There's one more item," he said. "The confidentiality clause. Mr. Reed has agreed not to disclose or distribute the evidence obtained during the marriage. In exchange, Mrs. Reed forfeits her claim to any remaining joint investments." Emily looked up sharply. "You mean the photos?" I nodded. "And the videos. You don't have to worry, they're not public. They served their purpose." Her lip trembled. "You humiliated me." "No," I said quietly. "You humiliated yourself. I just gave you an audience." Ryan leaned forward, his voice low, angry. "You think this makes you some kind of hero? You're sick, man. You." Mark's voice cut through, calm but firm. "Mr. Fletcher, I advise you to stop talking." Ryan ignored him. "You think you can just ruin people's lives and walk away clean? She's pregnant, for God's sake." That word, pregnant, hung in the air like smoke. Everyone went still. I turned toward him fully, studying the fear behind his anger. "Then you should take responsibility," I said softly. "It's your turn now." He paled. Emily's breath hitched, and she covered her face with her hands. The silence that followed was heavy enough to break something inside her. I could almost hear it, the quiet sound of denial collapsing into truth. Mark slid the pen across the table. "Mrs. Reed, if you'll sign the final page." Her hand shook as she took it. The pen hovered above the line for what felt like minutes. When she finally signed, her signature looked small, fragile, as if she were erasing herself with every letter. Mark gathered the pages, nodding once. "We're done here." I stood, buttoned my jacket, and looked at the two of them. The wreckage of what used to be my life, sitting side by side like conspirators caught too late to flee. Emily wouldn't meet my eyes. Ryan did, but there was no defiance left in him, just regret, raw and useless. "This isn't revenge," I said quietly. "It's procedure." I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Emily's voice crack. "Mike, please don't go like this." But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The soft click of the door closing behind me was cleaner than any goodbye. Outside, the sky was gray, the kind of flat light that makes the world look drained of color. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill my lungs. The city traffic roared below, distant and indifferent. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking ahead. I wasn't planning, recording, analyzing. I was just walking. I reached the corner, stopped, and glanced up at the mirrored glass of the nearby building. My reflection stared back, the same man, but hollowed out. Efficient. Finished. That night, I poured myself a drink and opened the cold_procedure folder one last time. Day 31. Procedure completed. Assets secured. Subject released. Objective final. Then I closed the laptop and shut off the light. For the first time since she'd said, "I'm pregnant," there was nothing left to do. No more lies. No more evidence. Just the silence of aftermath, and the faint, bitter taste of peace. The house was quieter than I'd ever heard it. No footsteps, no humming, no clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Just the dull ticking of the wall clock marking time that no longer belonged to anyone. Her things were gone. Every photograph, every piece of clothing, every trace of her perfume, erased. The space where her vanity once stood looked almost obscene in its emptiness. You don't realize how much a person occupies until they're reduced to absence. The first few mornings, I moved through the house, like a ghost retracing the steps of a living. I still made 2 cups of coffee. I still opened her side of a closet out of habit. Then, standing in front of the mirror, I'd catch myself halfway through a sentence meant for her. Silence would answer, and I'd let the thought die before it reached the air. The divorce had gone through faster than expected. Her lawyer didn't fight. There wasn't much left to fight for. Mark had handled the paperwork with machine-like precision. "It's clean," he'd said. Final. Clean. That word had a strange taste to it. Sterile, almost cold enough to feel pure. 2 weeks after the signing, the DNA results arrived. I opened the envelope slowly, though I already knew what I'd find. Probability of paternity, 0%. There it was. Simple, mathematical, merciless. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it into the cold_procedure folder, and poured myself a drink. The whiskey didn't burn anymore. Maybe I'd grown used to the taste of truth. News of the dinner incident had spread quickly. Olivia tried to reach out once, a cautious message asking if I was holding up. Others just vanished, friends choosing sides or pretending neutrality. Emily lost her job not long after. Ryan too. The corporate world doesn't forgive scandal, especially one that plays out under the hum of office gossip. Part of me thought I should feel triumphant. I had everything I'd aimed for: proof, closure, freedom. But sitting at that kitchen table each morning, staring at the empty chair across from me, I realized victory and emptiness can look exactly the same. Sometimes I'd catch myself glancing at the clock around the time she used to come home, expecting the sound of keys, her voice calling my name. The silence afterward felt heavier each day. I started walking in the evenings, long, pointless walks through the neighborhood, past houses where light spilled through kitchen windows and laughter bled into the night air. I'd watch families eating dinner, couples arguing gently on porches, the mundane beauty of lives still intact. Once, I saw a woman standing by her window, brushing her hair, her silhouette framed by warm yellow light. For a moment, I thought it was Emily. My heart reacted before my mind did, that involuntary tightening in the chest, the muscle memory of longing. Then she turned, and the illusion broke. Back home, I'd sit by the balcony with a drink, watching the city glow and dim in rhythm with the clouds. Nights had become longer somehow, stretching out between drinks, between thoughts. One night, I opened the laptop again, not to type, but to scroll through the cold underscore procedure folder. Every file was still there, the photos, the notes, the videos, the logs. The architecture of my own obsession. I hovered the cursor over timeline.txt, opened it, and read the entries from the beginning. Day 1. Discovery. Maintain calm. Observe. Collect. Day 12. Confirmation received. Subject exposed. Day 31. Procedure completed. Objective final. The final line stared back at me. Objective final. But nothing about this felt final. I closed the file, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. I realized I'd built my entire existence around her betrayal. Every thought, every move, every plan. And now, without it, there was nothing left to organize. Even anger would have been a comfort. But there was none. Just that deep, colorless space where emotion used to live. It struck me then how revenge doesn't end when you win. It ends when there's no one left to hate. A week later, I packed the flash drive, the one Jensen had given me, into a small envelope. I thought about deleting the files, but deletion felt too merciful, too clean. I needed something else, something that resembled closure, even if it was only a gesture. That night I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where she'd once told me she was pregnant, and whispered to no one, "You got what you wanted, Emily." And I got what I deserved. I didn't know which of us had lost more. Before heading to bed, I typed one last note in timeline.txt. Day 47. Aftermath. Evidence archived. Subject removed. Emotional state unquantifiable. Then I closed the file, shut down the laptop, and let the screen fade to black. The next morning, sunlight cut through the blinds, catching dust in midair. It looked almost peaceful. I sat with my coffee, staring at the empty chair again. It wasn't sadness anymore, just the echo of a habit that refused to die. I told myself the case was over, but deep down I knew it wasn't. Not yet. The morning I drove to the river, the sky was the color of unpolished steel. No sun, no shadow, just that flat gray light that makes the world feel suspended between seasons. The air smelled faintly of damp leaves and iron. It was early, too early for anyone else to be on the bridge. That suited me fine. I parked by the guardrail and stepped out, the cold biting through my coat. The Fox River moved slowly below, thick and dark, its surface broken only by the occasional swirl of current. I'd driven past this bridge 100 times before, but never stopped. Today felt like the right place, the right ending. In my pocket was the flash drive, small, metallic, weightless. I ran my thumb along its edge. The label was still there, smudged but legible. Cold underscore procedure. Everything was inside it, the photos, the videos, the files, the timeline, the proof. My own history, distilled into bites of silence. I leaned against the railing and looked down. The reflection of the bridge shimmered faintly in the water, fractured and uncertain. It reminded me of the life I'd been living, something that looked whole until you got close enough to see the cracks. For weeks, I told myself I'd move on once the dust settled. Sell the house. Transfer offices. Take a trip somewhere warm. But none of it happened. I just existed, efficient, functional, hollow. A man made of routines. The world kept moving without me. Colleagues congratulated me on handling things with dignity. My boss hinted at a promotion. Jensen emailed once, short and professional. Glad it's resolved. Take care of yourself. I didn't reply. Some nights I still dreamt of Emily, not the betrayal, not the confrontation, but small, ordinary moments. Her laughter echoing down the hallway. Her hair spilling over my pillow. The way she'd press her feet against mine in bed when they got cold. Waking from those dreams felt like losing her all over again. I reached into my coat and pulled out a small silver flask. The whiskey burned, clean and honest. The river's surface rippled under the wind, catching faint glimmers of light from a sun hidden somewhere behind the clouds. Case closed, I murmured. The words came out steadier than I expected. I turned the flash drive over in my palm, feeling its edges dig into my skin. It had been my anchor, my reason, my ritual. every entry in timeline.txt was a breadcrumb through madness. But now, there was nowhere left for the path to lead. I thought of Emily, then, where she might be. Maybe she'd left the city. Maybe she was still with him. Maybe she was alone. Part of me hoped she'd found peace. Another part hoped she hadn't. Both parts canceled each other out, leaving only quiet. I remembered something she said once, long before everything fell apart. We were sitting by this same river years ago in the warmth of summer. She'd pointed at the water and said, "It never stops. No matter what happens up here, it just keeps moving." Back then, I'd smiled and kissed her hand. Now, that memory stung, too gentle for the world we'd built after. I lifted the flash drive to my lips like a final toast. Then, without ceremony, I let it drop. It slipped from my fingers, caught the light once, and vanished into the current. A small splash. Then nothing. The ripples spread outward, soft and widening, until they disappeared entirely. I stood there, watching, waiting for some surge of feeling. Relief, grief, anger. Anything. But there was only stillness. Inside me, outside me. The quiet kind that doesn't soothe, but erases. The cold wind brushed against my face, numbing my skin. I finished the last sip from the flask and set it on the railing. Below, the river swallowed everything. Secrets, lies, proof, memory. For a brief, irrational moment, I wondered if Emily would ever stand here too. If she'd look into this same water and feel the same emptiness. The same slow ache that comes when revenge has nothing left to feed on. I didn't stay long after that. The world felt finished. As I turned back toward the car, a single line of sunlight broke through the clouds, faint but real, touching the surface of the water, just where the flash drive had sunk. It glimmered for an instant, then faded. I don't know if it meant anything. Maybe the universe was indifferent. Maybe it was just light. Driving home, the city unfolded in front of me. Buildings, traffic, people rushing toward their own private disasters. Everything was in motion again. Everything except me. When I reached the house, I didn't go inside right away. I stood on the porch, breathing in the cold air, listening to the distant hum of cars. The house was still mine, but it didn't feel like a home anymore. It was just another container for silence. That night, I didn't open the laptop. I didn't check the folder. I didn't need to. The case was over. Still, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I found myself whispering the same words I'd said by the river, softer this time, almost like a prayer. Case closed. And for the first time in months, I wasn't sure if I meant it. It's been 6 months since I threw the flash drive into the river. 6 months since the water swallowed everything I thought I needed to remember. Spring came and went. The city thawed, trees turned green again, and the rhythm of life resumed its steady hum. People rushing to work, couples laughing on sidewalks, children trailing behind with melting ice cream. Chicago never paused for anyone's grief. It just swallowed it and moved on. I rented out the old house. Too many ghosts in those walls. I told the new tenants the view from the balcony was perfect in the evening. I didn't tell them that's where I'd learned silence could be louder than truth. Now I live in a small apartment downtown, overlooking the river. The same one. Some mornings, when the light hits the water just right, I think I can still see a flicker, like the reflection of something buried deep below. Maybe it's the flash drive. Maybe it's memory. My life is clean now. Predictable. Efficient. I work, I exercise, I eat alone. I've stopped checking her social media, stopped listening for her name in conversations. At least, most days I have. People talk about closure like it's an ending, a clean cut. It isn't. Closure is quieter, more deceptive. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It slips in slowly, wearing the mask of indifference. You wake up one day, realize you haven't thought about them for a few hours, and that feels like progress. Then suddenly something small, a scent, a laugh, a song, drags you back, and you start counting the days again. I don't hate Emily anymore. Hatred needs fuel, and I burned through all of mine. What remains is something softer, stranger, pity, maybe, for both of us, for the people we were before we started lying to each other. Sometimes I try to remember the exact moment love turned into suspicion, when her eyes stopped being a comfort and became a puzzle I couldn't solve. I can't. It didn't happen all at once. Love doesn't die in a crash, it decays in whispers. A few weeks ago, I ran into Laura Jensen again. She was in the lobby of my building meeting another client. She recognized me immediately. "Mr. Reed," she said with a small smile. "How are things?" "Quiet," I told her. Finally, she nodded, her expression unreadable. Quiet can be good, or it can be dangerous. Before I could answer, she was already gone. That night, her words lingered. Quiet can be dangerous. I understood what she meant. When everything outside you goes still, you start hearing the noise inside. I'd like to say I found peace, but peace isn't the right word. What I found is distance, a kind of numb clarity that lets me look back without drowning. The cold has become familiar, almost comforting. Last week, I received a letter. No return address, just my name written in careful handwriting. I knew it was from her before I even opened it. Inside, there was only one line, written blue ink. "I hope someday you'll forgive me." No signature, no explanation. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and slid it into a drawer. I didn't feel anger or sadness or even curiosity, just a faint ache that reminded me I was still human. Forgiveness. It sounded like something meant for better people. I wasn't sure I wanted it. What good was forgiveness when the wound had already healed into something unrecognizable? The following morning, I walked down to the river again. The air was warm this time, heavy with the smell of rain and early summer. I leaned against the railing, looking at the water, steady, indifferent, eternal. Somewhere down there, beneath the surface, a small metal drive was still resting in the mud, holding every secret, every betrayal, every proof of who we'd been. And yet, the world kept spinning. I reached into my pocket and took out the letter. The ink had smudged slightly from my fingers. I tore it in half, then again, until the pieces were no bigger than confetti. The wind caught them easily, carrying them across the water. They fluttered for a second before dissolving into the current. Watching them go, I felt something, not forgiveness, not relief, but release. A kind of surrender. Maybe that's all closure really is, not understanding, not justice, just the quiet decision to stop carrying the weight of what's already sunk. As I turned to leave, a sudden gust swept across the bridge, and for a moment I thought I heard her voice, soft, familiar, almost warm. Maybe memory was playing tricks, or maybe it was the river speaking back. Either way, I didn't stop to listen. I walked away slowly, the city waking behind me, the sound of water fading into distance. The past was still there, under the surface, waiting. But I wasn't going back in after it. Not anymore.